This week, we'll be reading about information-seeking behaviors in music library users. To start, we need to be clear about a few terms: information needs, information seeking, and information behavior. Information in these cases is very broadly defined and includes creative works. Patrons looking for material in a library generally have an information need. They recognize that there's a gap in their knowledge that they must fill to achieve a goal. This doesn't have to be an assignment or a work project. It can include a much wider interpretation, including something like wanting to know where to find the best sushi in town or whether to buy a certain car. Some examples of music-related information needs might include looking for repertory or performance practice information, as well as looking for models for analytical approaches or scholarly articles for a paper. Information seeking is a conscious effort to address an information need. Googling has, of course, become a very common way of seeking information, but it can also include library searches, talking to people who might help, like librarians, instructors, colleagues, or classmates, or more informal or less focused approaches like browsing. Information behavior is a bit broader. It includes information seeking, but also a broader set of behaviors related to information, including passive or unconscious behaviors, or even avoiding information. And it also includes information use and even creation of new information. For example, subscribing to a listserv, social media account, or newsfeed, and then passively encountering the posted information is an information behavior. Performing, posting, and publishing the results of your work are also information behaviors. There are a number of different theories and models for discussing information behavior. One that's used in this module's reading is Anders Hector's social model of information behavior. I'll link to a video with some other models in this week's materials in case you'd like to explore them. Hector's model was developed for talking about information behavior in everyday life, not academic or work situations, but the activities are meant to be pretty broadly applicable. He divides information behavior into 4 categories: seeking, gathering, communicating, and giving. That is, information behavior includes both the seeking aspect and other parts of the ways we interact with information, including coming to understand and organize that information, sharing it with others, and creating new information from it. The further subdivision into 8 information activities can help us to consider the different ways our users might engage with information, and therefore with libraries. Thinking broadly like this is especially helpful for working with patrons who may not use information in the same ways that we do, or that we're most familiar with. Groups like conductors, performers, composers, amateur musicians, and leisure listeners have been much less studied than traditional academic users like researchers and students, even within music librarianship. Since this model was designed for analyzing everyday life behaviors, it's more broadly applicable than some others. Information seeking is an especially important element of information behavior and the focus of many studies, in part because it's so important for librarians to understand how patrons look for information and where they have trouble. As an aside, a lot of the literature on information seeking focuses on time-bound needs: students working on a paper, employees working on a particular project, and so on. However, much information seeking is atemporal, meaning that users are engaging in long-term learning or projects and frequently put information aside for later use. The articles we're reading this week suggest that it's particularly true for conductors and possibly other musician groups, but I think many scholars and other professionals would also tell you that they engage in some degree of this type of information seeking because they understand the current time-bound project to be part of an ongoing network of projects and professional development stretching across a much larger time frame. One important model for conceiving of the seeking process is Carol Kulthau's information search process model. She was primarily focused on student patrons when she formulated the model, so it works best for that group, but it's more broadly useful as well. This process involves initiating the project or need, maybe through an assignment or a change that creates a new information need. And then selection, which refers not just to the selection of the sources, but selection of topics. Exploration, again, means exploring the topic and field of study, and formulating means focusing in on the research area and formulating a question. Collection of information that is pertinent to that question follows, and then preparation of the results for presentation or submission. Kuhltau's model is different from Hector's because it focuses on the search, not all information behaviors. And it implies a process and timeline. Hector's model lists information activities that may form part of a process, but can also exist more independently or in other orders. While they are different types of models, we could think about the steps of Kuhltau's process as involving several of the same activities as Hector's model. Moving through Kuhltau's process is likely to involve an iterative use of search and retrieval and browsing activities, unfolding activities such as reading and listening, exchange of information with instructors and classmates, and dressing activities like note-taking and summarizing. It may not really include other activities in Hector's model like monitoring and publishing, since it's focused on elements related to search. Part of Kuhltau's focus on students and its unique approach is about anticipating the affective state of students in the process, that is, how they'll feel about research, and places where the intervention of a librarian can be most helpful. Reading Kirsten Dugan's articles, we can see some of the places where the actual searching tools and activities involved in the student's information search process can cause frustration and pessimism about the process. Areas with the most frustration are important zones of intervention, where help from a librarian can be most useful. This is often framed in terms of targeting reference and instruction effort, but research into the details of patrons' information behavior and where they run into problems can lead to improved collection development, discovery systems, web design, and metadata as well. For most academic library users, searching in library catalogs or discovery layers happens throughout the information search process. Compared to other kinds of academic users, users looking for music face additional challenges. Shorter works are often found in collections under variant titles. Pieces may have generic titles like Symphony No. 1. There are identifiers like keys and opus numbers that can be difficult to include in searches, and there are substantially different editions, arrangements, and recordings that will appear under the same titles. Scores, in particular, appear to cause students difficulty in search and retrieval. Students may have an easier time finding versions of what they need freely available online via score repositories like IMSLP or streaming media like YouTube or Spotify, but sometimes the versions available in those ways are less suitable or complete than what they could access through the library if they could find it. At the same time, several studies show that students are overconfident in their own research abilities, so they may be unlikely to ask for help even when they run into trouble. Studies also show that student work is typically time restricted, and that the time constraints are a major factor in their choices.